I would I would love to get your take on the fact that, you know, you are a 53-year-old woman. Like you said, you are happy and you
Yes,
are single and you don't have kids.
yes, yes.
Like, talk to me about that. For
Yes,
anyone who thinks that it is not possible, there are two women right now having this conversation, both of whom are happily single and child-free.
And let me tell you happily, it was my brother who is happily married with two children, which, you know, my niece and nephew. He loves my lifestyle and completely celebrates it. And he's a very traditional man and husband and father. But he thinks that it's better to really be exactly who you are, because that's how you're going to be a whole magical person on this planet during this lifetime, right? So that when people are projecting their fear, their insecurities, their narrative, it's because they can't possibly fathom thinking any other way. And it scares them to bits
Yeah,
because they don't know how to address that. It's easier to lean in and believe what they were taught or what they think is to be right. Far easier because you don't have to do any work. You
yeah,
don't have to be brave. You
yeah,
don't have to go against the grain. You don't have to stand apart. You have to fear some backlash. You have to stand up against people that push back. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They don't want to put their head above the crowd in fear of being shot, right?
yeah,
So they keep their head down and then they fight against anybody that's trying to be different, trying to be unique. It's as old as time with anybody trying to make any sort of change or do anything outside of the norm.
yeah.
But like you said before we started the podcast, there's been lots and lots of new studies that show that happy single child-free women live longer. There was just a study of a woman living in England who is 105 years old. I don't know if you saw this. And they said, "What is your secret to longevity?" And she's like, "I didn't get married, I didn't have kids, and I drink beer every
I
day."
did, you know what I did? I saw an article on that.
And I was like, "Who's that? I like her." Um, no, but it's funny because what we're saying here is not that being married and having children is bad. My God, it's wonderful if that's your choice.
Yeah,
This is our choice. I know myself. I happen to be a very, very independent person. I love my freedom. I tried marriage once. It wasn't for me. I chose to leave the marriage. I chose to leave a 6.5 year relationship. I chose to leave my last guy that I was with, who was lovely, by the way, a wonderful person. I just chose to leave because the traditional type of relationship doesn't suit me. I'm better independent. I'm better as part-time or once in a while, right? Like my friends, I don't live 24/7 and see my friends 24/7, and they've been my friends my whole life.
mm,
We don't bombard each other and expect each other to behave a certain way at all times. Why do we do that with a partner, right?
yeah,
So if that is kind of what marriage is, I rather just see somebody occasionally. Right now I barely date. I don't online date because I'm happy on my own. If I meet somebody organically, great. I'll go on a date here and there, but I always say up front, I'm not looking for marriage. I'm not looking for living with somebody or settling down. If you're okay with that, we can continue. If not, I'm
yeah,
not the person for you. You have to be comfortable in your choices and know that they're right, know that they're real. And
yeah.
people that fight back and push back, it's because they might be too afraid. And listen, it doesn't have to be for you. Maybe you just move on and follow somebody that has your belief system instead of raging against people that are just trying to make it okay for those who want to make a choice like us.
100%. And do you know what though? And you are quite clearly one of these people that it's so obvious that there are plenty of single women out there who just thrive alone. And
Yes.
I'd love to hear more about your story of this in terms of your kind of past relationships and how you've, you know, ended up single now, because like you say, you walked away from a marriage, you walked away from boyfriends. Um,
Mm,
because when I look back, and I don't know whether you'll be able to relate to this or resonate with this at all, but when I look back to my last few relationships,
mm,
I walked away from the last few long-term relationships that I had. But what I think I didn't realize at the time, and what I've realized more and more in the last few years, particularly since doing this podcast, actually, is that
mm.
I'm better on my own, and
Yes.
I'm happier on my own, and I thrive more by myself. And I know
Mhm.
that not all single women do, But I'd love you to speak to that, just about this
Yes,
idea that some of us do thrive as a solo,
yes.
living a solo life.
Listen, I like to make my sister-in-law a perfect example. My sister-in-law was born to have children and be a mother. I mean, it's just who she is, and she's so good at it and wonderful at it. And I wouldn't see that any other way. And she likes that and loves that and lives that life. I thrive and was born to be an independent traveling entrepreneur and makeup artist. That's what I was born to do. If I feel like I can't do those things on a whim when I want,
Mm,
and follow my passions, I get anxiety and panic, and I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. That's not to say that I'm selfish. I'm very unselfish. I'm a very generous person, both with friends and chosen family and real family, and as an auntie, and it's just a matter of my passion, my focus, and my thrive comes from Carmindy Beauty and what I do to help other women. And I remember at a time when I was married or in a long-term relationship, um, being told things like, I remember my first marriage, I had done a book, my first book, and I had a big book tour across the country. And I remember I was about ready to do a second book, and he didn't want me to do a second book because that means that I'd be gone on a book tour.
right.
And I was like, wait, what? You don't want me to succeed and write another book that empowers women and makes them feel good about themselves, which is what I love to do because you don't want to be alone.
Mm,
And I thought that was absolutely crazy. I mean, we didn't have children. It was just, I'm like, this person clearly needs to be with somebody who's codependent. And there's lots of people out there that want to stay home and cook and clean for their man. Good for you. Go find that. But
mm,
you've got to be clear on who you are and what makes you thrive and what makes you happy.
yeah.
And then you have to make the hard decisions. I know so many people that are in bad relationships to this day because they're afraid to be alone. They are scared to stand on their own 2 feet. And so they stay in it for the wrong reasons, or maybe their friends or family will judge them.
Yeah.
So they stay put. And it breaks my heart because they could be thriving if they had the courage to step out there. And I hope that that's what this podcast does and what you're doing does for other women. What I hope my little viral video did for women is make them understand that there's a choice.
Yeah.
You have to be brave, but there's a support team out here for you. And we are loving our lives. And
Yeah.
it's not that we're trying to convince ourselves, look at our lives, look what we're doing, look how we're celebrating and communicating and teaching and helping. That's
Yeah.
real there.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I would really love to talk to you about is the idea that, because, I think you sort of touched on this earlier in the conversation about the fact that you're not saying, and you weren't saying in that reel that one is better than the other. And that's always been one of the main sort of, threads through my podcast. I'm pretty sure I said it in the very, very first introduction, the sort of welcome episode,
Mm.
that the thing is that it's not as though being single and not having kids is better than
Mhm.
being married and having kids, and nor is being married with kids better than being single and not having kids. The point is that they're both just two completely different paths in life. And at
That's
the end of
correct.
the day, whatever path you choose to take in life is going to have good bits, it's going to have shit bits.
That's
And
right.
right?
It's not all a party and sleep until 10 every morning. I mean, it is, there are times where things are not as easy on both sides of the fence. This is not a case of right or wrong. It's just there are choices out there. I find what we need to stop doing is the judgment, the harsh judgment of people that don't follow or believe what you do. You don't see us going around going, oh God, they got married and had kids. Oh, losers. Like we don't do that. So why are people still doing that with women that choose to be child free and single? That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they're desperate cat ladies, which we've heard this narrative over and over again. I think that's so incredibly funny because it's like, okay, wow. How about like, I know somebody who probably shouldn't have been a mother, who doesn't have patience, who has addiction problems, who did it because she was forced into it because of her family and religion, and the family kind of cracked in half and just created children that had more issues. It's like if that person had a choice early on and knew that they shouldn't have been a mom and went for it and had the ability to do so within her family or religion, it would have created a much more harmonious life for her and the family members around her. So
Yeah.
people have to be self-aware. You have to be self-aware of your own limitations as well, your strengths and your limitations,
Yeah.
and then be able to pair a life with that, hopefully that makes sense. Now, that's not to say that, parents make mistakes and they're not perfect. I get that. And I know a lot of single people that make tons of mistakes and aren't perfect. It's just, again, having self-awareness and truly believing in yourself and having courage to follow a path that might be different than society's norms.
Totally. What would you say to single women out there who still think that they need a man in order to find happiness? Because
I
I
always think
personally believe that even if you want to be in a relationship, let's say you are one of those women who, like your sister-in-law, who is made to be married and have have babies, which is fabulous and
yeah,
great and lovely. But
yeah.
if you're, I think, even if you are someone who wants those things, actually, we have to learn to be able to stand on our own 2 feet and to be able to find happiness without that happiness having to come through the channel of a relationship.
That's
What would you
absolutely.
say to those women who think that they need a man or feel that they need a man in order to feel complete or to feel happy?
I would say that you have to start doing a lot of self work, and introspection. Start reading a lot of books. There's an incredible book called The Seeker's Guide by Elizabeth Lesser. It's just more about seeking kind of spirituality. But you start seeing that we are all our unique own entities, and yes, we are all completely and truly connected. But not one person fulfills us. We have to be able to vibrate on a high frequency all by ourselves, and kind of handle good and bad things that come into our lives on our own. And then yes, join forces if we want to or if we can. But there are no guarantees in life. Things come, things go. We cannot say, oh, because I find somebody, then I'm going to be happy, and without that person I'm going to be unhappy. You're setting yourself up for failure right there, because life is, you can't control it. You don't
Yeah,
know if that person's going to get sick and pass away or leave you, or change, or you're going to change. That you have to be okay with yourself.
yeah,
And then if you randomly happen to meet somebody, then amazing, good for you. I'm open to love. I'm not closed down to love. I love myself and I love my friends, I love my family, and I love the idea of love, but I also understand that love comes in so many forms.
yeah,
You know, like I said, being an aunt, being a friend, being a person that gives back to the community.
yeah,
And if it comes in the form of romantic love, yay, but it doesn't have to be all encompassing. We are really browbeaten that that's the only kind of love there is. And that is kind of a fantasy, like an adolescent childish fantasy. It's
yeah.
not realistic, because even that kind of romantic love does change once you're married and in it in the
Yeah.
long
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought this subject up, actually, the subject of love, because I have found, and I've been single for more than 7 years now. And during those 7 years, I have never felt like I am lacking or missing love
haul.
in my life. And yeah, I've had like one barely a fling in those 7 and a bit years.
Yeah.
But I have felt like I have plenty of love in my life, not
Yeah.
in the form of romantic love, but like you say, there are so many different kinds of love. We are sisters, we are daughters, we are friends, we are aunties, we are,
Why, yeah,
you
and
know,
why is that less important than a romantic love?
exactly. That's the thing. It's like romantic love is held up as being it's just held up as being above any other kind of love. But I would really argue that that is not the case, and that actually all the other kinds of love are equally important and can fill you up
I,
enough. And if anyone out there sort of, any of the single women that think that they are going to get what they need to fill, completely fill them up with love is a guy or a girl or who, a romantic partner. I really disagree with that, because I've been on both sides of that coin, as you have. I've
Mhm.
been in relationships, so I know what it's like to be in love, in romantic love, and I also know what it's like to live a very happy single life and feel so much love from all of those other relationships. Can you speak to
Mhm.
that a bit, Carmindy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading something recently where somebody gave an example of somebody who has a heartbreak, and they're like, well, you can't actually have a heartbreak. You have a heart reshaping. Your heart actually never breaks. It just reshapes. But it's like, okay, so say you're with a partner and you think you're in love, right? All those are chemicals in your brain. Those are dopamine and serotonin, and they're fling, 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 right? And you feel elevated and you're like, oh wow, woozy, right? Okay, so and then you guys break up and you can't get out of bed and you're depressed and you're sad, right? Well, if that person happens to call and say, I'm coming over, I want to make up with you again, all of a sudden you're sitting up and you have all the energy again. It's a chemical hit. It's a chemical hit. That's all it is,
It's so
right?
true.
A phone call and a voice does not change your actual physical chemistry of what makes you exhausted and depressed versus happy and excited. You can do that with your mind. And
Yeah.
if you are playing with your niece and nephew or your dogs or with your girls on a girl trip or at a party with your family or people that are dancing on a beach at New Year's Eve, like all those endorphins rise up. It can change on a choice and change by the way you think about your environment and whatever type of love you're focusing on.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's chemicals and it's a mind choice. It's a perception of reality of what's around you. That's how you raise your energy. Your energy is always inside your body,
Yeah.
right? You can just choose to raise it up or push it down.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we are conditioned to think that romantic love raises it up and it takes an outside force. It does not take an outside force. It takes you as the force.
So
You and
true.
you alone.
So true. I love it. I love it. And so much of this, I believe, is about, the way that we're thinking about anything. So with anything in life, whether it be love or anything else, it is so much to do with how we are choosing to think about it and where we are in our mindset. And I have been in a much more negative mindset than I am these days.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's about you got to do that work to
Yeah.
change the way that you not just see relationships, but see the world. And because it's
Right.
all about the lens through which you're looking. I've said this so many times, but it cannot be overstated, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, especially when it comes to aging, right? Like the whole aging component. I'm 53. I love being 53. I talk about my age all the time. I talk about when I'm going to be 54. I've never had that tarnish of age, and I'm in the beauty industry.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the way that I've seen beauty, which has kind of led me into my whole career, again, starting at a young age, something would happen to me when I would look at a face. More makeup artists than not, when they look at a face, they see all the things that they want to change and fix and shade and contour to make you look like an ideal kind of symmetrical figure, right?
Mm.
As an artist, when I look at a face, I've never seen that. I see beauty in absolutely every face I see. I don't care what kind of face it is, what age it is, if was an accident, if there were scars. I see beauty in all the uniqueness. And so what happens when I look at a face is my eyes blur and something pops up from that face. And it's usually an energy or a feature. And that's what is beautiful to me. And that's what I've always used makeup to enhance. And that's how I've seen beauty. So age has never been an issue. Yeah, we can all do things to make ourselves look really good along the way, and it's fun to play. But at the same time, our knowledge and our intuition and our hearts and everything, our brains and our third eye, everything grows with age and becomes so much more expansive and magical. Our patience, our bullshit detector, all of it just gets better and better and bigger and bigger and flowy, and we don't care about the little stuff anymore. And it's a much happier and more beautiful place to be. And I remember that when I was 40, I had a boyfriend that was like, "You're old, you're getting older." Like he was always trying to put me down and
Oh my
talk
God.
about how old I was because he felt that way because he was the same age and he wanted me to feel bad and complain about it. And he saw me just not caring. And so he was trying to project his stuff onto me. I also remember at 39, I was trying to start a beauty brand and I had a big marketing person say, "Oh, you've got to start this before you're 39. You're going to be too old to have a makeup line." And I was like, according to who? Like, I
Yeah.
never bought into that BS. I just didn't. I just thought it was so silly that there's plenty of time and there's always a market and there's always people to talk to. And the more that we drop ageism and surround ourselves with all ages, then we grow.
Yeah.
It's not just like us against them. It's so silly.